الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Why do Muslim women have to cover themselves?
Throughout history we find that all females have had to cover themselves, irrespective of whether they are of a religion or not. And we find on many levels, as an example, we have to cover our private parts. That's common to all human beings. And then you cover areas of beauty, as an example. There are certain finer parts of the human being which you seek to cover. And then on the third level there is the covering, which is known as the hijab, or the covering of the hair, as it's known in many Western circles.
Most people in these Western societies feel that men are forcing the hijab onto women.
Number one, there is no compulsion in this area of hijab, and the idea that no man can come and forcibly make a woman wear a scarf. Number two, the first hijab was actually a hijab ordained upon the man. When you look in the Quran, and you look in chapter 24 of the Quran, verse number 30, you find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressing the males first, and that their hijab was what? Their hijab was to lower their gaze and to protect their private parts. It was only after that that the hijab of the female came. So the first message was addressed to the male, because if the female wears the hijab, if the female looks after the hijab, yet the males do not respect the hijab, then you will not have spirituality within a society.
Are there any other religions that ask women to cover themselves?
Amongst the other religions, one can see, for example, within Christianity, the writings of Paul. And amongst the writing of Paul is where he states that the duty and indeed an honor for the female is that she covers herself. Furthermore, you find that if you go to any church today, you will never see Mary without a scarf. Every church has a Mary who's wearing a scarf. And this shows us that Christianity, entrenched within its beliefs, is this idea of the scarf being worn. Furthermore, even if outside religions you were to go to other cultures, there are cultures where out of the respect of the female, when she goes to public places, public arenas, she covers her hair, as an example. Even if you look in the British history, you will find that many of the females in the 19th century, whether they were religious or no, is irrespective. What you find is that many of them used to wear a scarf to cover their hair, and there was an amount of decency which was displayed with each of their movements. We find also in Hinduism that many of the females, especially we find in society today, many of the older ladies in the Hindu religion are seen to cover their hair and cover the rest of their body as well. So hijab is a philosophy not only entrenched in Islam, but entrenched throughout history and throughout religion.
In Western societies, there are many issues raised around Muslim women wearing the scarf, while we don't have any around nuns covering themselves.
Definitely, definitely. And this is, of course, something which has to be addressed, and sometimes it's because of the misunderstanding of the scarf. We find, for example, there are many recent court cases where Muslim females have been taken by companies to court. For example, Taco Bell took a female to court. For example, Sheraton Hotel took one of its female employees to court. And the idea, unfortunately, which is portrayed in the West, is that the hijab is a form of oppression on the female. Even in some circles, would you believe, they believe that the female can't even reveal her hair at home when she's alone with her husband. They actually think that the female wears this scarf throughout the day. We have to come and address these issues by, number one, addressing to them the physical significance. Number two, addressing to them the idea that yes, physically I may wear a whole blanket on top of my body. But if there's no modesty in the way I talk, if there's no modesty in the way I walk, if there's no modesty in my eye contact, all of these are other forms of social hijab.
What are the misunderstandings of the Western societies about hijab?
As I pointed out, one of the misunderstandings is that the female has to constantly cover herself at home. No, the female, when she goes into social gatherings, for example, between other females, she is allowed to dress as she wants, of course to a certain degree, but she's allowed to dress as she wants. The idea is, unfortunately in Western circles, is that this female is being oppressed by the scarf. On the contrary, the scarf is taking her to higher levels. And in taking her to higher levels, we find numerous examples in history of great females who achieved great intellectual feats. And when you look back at the annals of history, you find that not only were the Muslim women who achieved great intellectual feats, like Khadija. Khadija was a lady, the wife of the Prophet, who achieved economic feats. She was arguably the most wealthy woman in Arabia, economically gifted, a lady who controlled the family business, yet at the same time displayed the most modesty with the scarf.
Okay. Since there are many Muslims living in the Western societies, how can we as Muslims address this issue?
Us as Muslims, the first area we must address is this area of uniformity. And what this means is that culture has a part to play within the religion of Islam. But there is a certain hijab that has to be observed and that people have to understand what this hijab is. And I'll give you an example. If on a Friday morning at 9 o'clock there's someone interviewing a Muslim girl who has just entered the place of work. He's interviewing her for a job. He asks her, what's your name? She gives him, for example, a name like Zainab, let's just say. And he sees, when he looks at Zainab, he sees Zainab is wearing the tight t-shirt, jeans and no scarf. So he's like, okay, no problem, Zainab, Muslim girl, but doesn't wear. At 12 o'clock, another girl comes in. Let's just say she's called Fatima. When she walks in, she's wearing a shirt, jeans, but she's wearing a scarf as well. So he's thinking, okay, the first one, no scarf, the second one, scarf. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, another girl walks in called Khadija, who's wearing full dress and wearing the scarf. And he's like, hold on, I've interviewed 3 Muslim girls and their scarves are all different. At 6 o'clock, he, for example, interviews a girl called Aisha who's wearing a niqab. Now when this girl is wearing a niqab, this person's thinking either this subject of hijab is a cultural issue or it's a religious issue. Because if the Muslims themselves do not seem uniform in the way they are displaying themselves, then you cannot blame the outside for thinking it's a cultural issue. And how many times do you hear at the place of work where there is a Muslim girl who works there and the employer tells her, but you don't wear the scarf, and she replies, well, you don't have to wear the scarf. Now this employer in the West then goes back to his family and says, to tell you the truth, I know a few Muslim females and they don't have to wear the scarf. And then it brings contradiction. And within any community, when there's contradiction, there is never going to be any success achieved.
And what would you like the Western societies to understand about Islam, about hijab?
I'd like them to understand that hijab is a means towards reaching perfection. As in all of us in this world today recognize the importance of clothes. You go to any country in the world today, you have New Bond Street, you have, for example, Rodeo Drive, you have Champs-Élysées, you have all of these famous roads which are dedicated to clothing. You hear of designers Prada and Armani and Louis Vuitton and Gucci, and you hear all of these names in the idea that the human being constantly seeks to look after his image. Likewise, in Islam we recognize the importance of the image and the importance of clothing, but we recognize it as a means, not as an end. If I recognize the importance of clothing but I have no heart, I have no morality, then there's no point. I may have the most beautiful image, but my heart may be black and my morality may be something which others will say leaves a lot to be desired. Therefore, in the religion of Islam we say, and what we want to portray to the West, is that this clothing is only a means towards us achieving our goal. If a person you see has worn the full scarf but lacks the morals which come with this scarf, lacks the modesty, then no, this is not enough. And that's why, unfortunately, and it's important to mention this, in some of our countries in the Middle East, the girls over there who are wearing the hijab, for example, many of them are wearing the hijab and they even wear the niqab, where they cover everything apart from their eyes. Yet sometimes the eyes can do more talking than anything in the human body. And you go and you look at them and their eyes are moving and the mascara is everywhere and so on, and you're looking at it and you're thinking, unfortunately they haven't recognized that their hijab is not the end, rather their hijab has only been a means towards them reaching an excellent goal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.